A film that made $1.4 billion may never get a sequel. The salary standoff, the contract mistake made before the first movie, and the December deadline that could hand the franchise to Mattel. The director has an idea for the sequel and refuses to tell the studio what it is until she is paid, and that single detail explains who actually holds the power here. On July 31st, 2026, the New York Times reported that Warner Brothers Discovery was facing a quiet crisis. A story followed on August 1st by trade outlets Variety and The Hollywood Reporter. At the center of the dispute is Chief Executive David Zaslav, who reportedly refused to sign off on richer contract packages for Margot Robbie, Ryan Gosling, and Greta Gerwig. Internal objections leaked to the trades described the proposed terms as too generous. To get the talent back, the studio has to negotiate two distinct types of pay. The first is a guaranteed upfront fee, which is paid regardless of how the film performs. Ryan Gosling is reportedly asking for $20 million to return as Ken. The second type is profit participation, where the talent only gets paid when the movie hits specific box office milestones. Warner Brothers disputes this framing. Studio representatives stated they made a series of big offers and that the actors' representatives have not yet submitted a counteroffer. While the public record does not show Robbie's exact demands or Gerwig's specific terms, reporting from the RAP and NME cross-check the basic terms of the stalemate. It leaves the industry asking a fundamental question. Why does a studio have to bargain from scratch for the people behind its most successful release? In 2021, Warner Brothers began assembling the creative team for Barbie. At the time, several rival studios were courting Greta Gerwig, and Warner Brothers believed the only way to secure her vision was to accept a major concession: one-picture agreements. Both Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling joined the project under these exact same terms. A standard one-picture contract defines a commitment to a single film, with no automatic obligation to return for a follow-up. Normally, major studios protect their long-term franchise interests by writing sequel options directly into the initial paperwork. These options typically include exclusivity windows, predetermined salary escalators, usually 10 to 15% increases, and pay-or-play provisions that preserve studio control if a movie succeeds. Warner Brothers bypassed those safety nets entirely. Securing Gerwig meant foregoing those future options. Before the film became a global cultural phenomenon, this decision represented a rational pre-release risk trade-off. The studio limited its upfront financial exposure on an unproven, highly unconventional property. But when Barbie grossed $1.448 billion in 2023, that initial compromise became incredibly expensive. Without pre-negotiated sequel clauses, the power dynamic inverted. The exact wording of these private contracts remains confidential, but the practical result is clear. The principal talent can negotiate a follow-up from scratch with enormous negotiating power, rather than accepting standard, pre-budgeted escalators. The studio's own paperwork left it completely exposed. This contractual vulnerability carries a hard expiration date. Reports from the New York Times, The Hollywood Reporter, and Yahoo Finance reveal that Warner Brothers is operating under a strict December 2026 deadline. If the studio fails to secure signed contracts with the core creative team by this cutoff, the rights to a Barbie sequel do not simply face production delays, they revert entirely to Mattel. This reversion clause transforms a standard negotiation into an existential fight for custody over the franchise. If the deadline passes without an agreement, Warner Brothers immediately loses its grasp on the production, distribution, and commercial direction of any future follow-up. Control over the highly lucrative intellectual property returns to Mattel, which operates its own expanding film division, Mattel Films. Once the rights revert, the toy maker can choose its own path. Mattel could self-produce the movie, license the property to a rival studio such as Universal or Paramount, or design an entirely new distribution partnership on far more favorable terms. For Mattel, the priority is safeguarding the long-term health of its flagship brand while maximizing its future financial participation. For Warner Brothers, the December cutoff forces an uncomfortable reality. The studio's current negotiations dictate whether they maintain control of the intellectual property or surrender it permanently. They are fighting to retain the right to make the movie at all. Reporting from Vulture reveals a creative twist that complicates the negotiations even further. Greta Gerwig and her writing partner and husband, Noah Baumbach, have reportedly developed a concept for the sequel. However, they are refusing to share this premise with Warner Brothers until their contracts are finalized. In standard Hollywood development, a writer pitches a premise, the studio evaluates its commercial potential, negotiates terms, and then decides whether to proceed. This reported holdout reverses that sequence. It creates a stark information asymmetry. Warner Brothers is forced to negotiate without knowing what the movie is actually about. Without a premise, the studio cannot estimate a realistic production budget, assess creative value, or plan around commercial potential. It makes bargaining blind incredibly expensive. This tactic represents pure creative leverage, though it is not a guarantee that a sequel will ultimately get made. For Gerwig and Baumbach, the strategy protects the value of their idea before they surrender control of it. For the studio, it presents a difficult challenge, putting a price tag on an invisible asset. Neither Gerwig, Baumbach, nor their representatives have publicly confirmed this reporting, and no official documents have leaked. It leaves Warner Brothers facing an open question. How do you value a sequel when you don't even know what the story is? Barbie collected exactly $1.448 billion worldwide after its July 2023 release, cementing its place as the highest-grossing film in Warner Brothers history. But in theatrical economics, that headline gross does not equal the cash returning to the studio. First, theater owners take roughly half of the ticket sales. From the remaining pool, Warner must cover the original $145 million production budget, a massive global marketing campaign, residuals, and distribution expenses. Only then does the studio see actual profit. This distinction explains why the negotiation is so tense. Warner Brothers Discovery is managing a multi-billion-dollar debt load, placing heavy emphasis on cost control and free cash flow. For the studio, agreeing to higher fixed upfront fees increases its financial exposure before a single ticket is sold. It prefers performance-linked participation, which aligns payouts with actual box office success. But the creative team sees the math differently. To them, a historic success fundamentally recalibrates their market value. They view these negotiations as a standard valuation adjustment for a proven commercial asset. If Warner Brothers insists on tight cost controls, they risk losing the sequel rights entirely when the December deadline arrives. The ultimate corporate irony is that the studio might lose a proven billion-dollar franchise over the mathematical gap between a guaranteed upfront fee and a percentage of the back-end profits. Today, Hollywood's biggest gamble isn't greenlighting a blockbuster, but trusting its own paperwork. In an industry built on intellectual property, the ultimate power no longer rests with executive suits, but with the creators who make those brands human. Subscribe for daily entertainment stories.